Okay. So you guys will be the first to know, the readings still are not up. And because of this, there's going to be a special opportunity. So I'm going to give people 2 chances for the second week's quiz. So if you've already done the second week's quiz,
yeah.
you can take it again. I would wait until you get, well, I guess it doesn't matter because you'll see what the correct answer is and you'd know what the right answers are. But I would encourage you not just to do that because you won't learn as much as if you actually read the material, but it's my, forgive me for not having the reading up yet, freebie. Yay.
Let's get 10 out of 10, guys.
Good luck. Oh, I need one book, too.
Where'd it go?
Really? I'm going to finally say it.
Okay, this is you're not. That's why I put that answer on my quiz. Like, I had it right, and then I was trying to make some problem.
Very important.
It doesn't matter because it's considered all the you're going to do that after school. Even if you don't have classes.
You still have her.
All right.
I love her.
So today we're going to talk about variables. I've already said what an independent variable and a dependent variable are. Right. But there are a couple other variable types that you guys really need to know about in order to be good research practitioners. So we're going to talk about what those are today. And a reason that I've held off on talking about these other variable types is because without understanding what a correlation is, it's very hard to understand what differentiates these other variable types. Crucial to our understanding of correlation and causation, or at least crucial to our understanding of causation, which most of us are interested in research, we want to know the causes of something. We also need to understand correlations. Last class we talked about Mills's methods, which are focused on helping us to identify causes for some phenomena, right? What caused the bad gas? Probably the baked beans. Now, in the last class, I said that almost all of those, all of the Mills methods were related to causation, or were related to correlation, except for one. Which one was that? The method of addition, the method of agreement. The what? Agreement. Yeah, not addition. Agreement. The method of agreement, right. So it was the method of agreement that I said, you know, it's not really correlational exactly, and why not?
Because it's only one thing.
There's only one phenomenon of interest, right? And everyone has that. Everyone has the bad gas. So because there's no variability in that phenomenon, it's hard to say, aha, yes, this correlates with something else because there's no variability in that thing. Does that make sense? However, one person said that you could view it in a correlational way, and after thinking about it long and hard, I can agree with him when taken from a certain perspective. So what perspective could I take that would help me understand whether or not it's correlational in nature? So in order to have a correlation, we need to have 2 variables, right? We should have variability in both. So we've got a bit of a problem because we don't have variability in one. We don't have variability in the phenomenon, and we also don't have the variability in what? In the common circumstance. Yeah, in the baked beans. No variability in the baked beans. But what is their variability? Yeah, the other things that they ate, right? So if we were to like plot, yes, no, gas, and we were going to plot foods, plots, foods eaten, we've got baked beans, and everyone is up here, we're going to indicate how many people there are with the size of the symbol. So, for other foods, like soda, what should happen? Well, if soda is completely unrelated to having gas, how many people should be in the yes condition? How many people should be in the no condition? Lots. Okay, so we've got lots of people in the yes condition. How many people do we have in the no condition? About the same. Right? If you're flipping a coin, if people decide whether or not to drink soda and it's sort of random, you would expect half of the soda drinkers to get the gas and half of them not to. Actually, it's not the soda that's random, but if people are eating baked beans at random, right? So half of the soda drinkers should have it, half of them should not. If we look at any other food type, fruit salad, if half of them are choosing to eat baked beans and half of the others are choosing not to bake beans, we do have variations here, right? But the variations aren't more associated with one than with something else. So in that sense, it is quasi-correlation. Okay, so I want to talk about an experiment. Yes, an experiment, before I even define what an experiment is. So imagine I want to see if people can tell the difference between 11 paper clips and 10 paper clips. So I am going to set up a table like this one, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to get 2 envelopes, and I am going to put, let's see, I'm going to put 11 paper clips in the one on the left, and I'm going to put 10 paper clips in the one on the right. Okay? Then I'm going to have people come up to the table, and I'm going to ask them to please, feel the envelopes. So they're going to come up, and they're not able to do this one with both hands and put it down and go back and forth. They're going to come up, grab the envelopes, put the envelopes down, and then they're going to record on a piece of paper, or maybe we could do something else. I could have a jar of marbles and give everyone a marble, and then they drop the marble and, to indicate which one they thought had more paper clips in them. So I'm interested in seeing if people can tell the difference between 10 and 11 paper clips. And lo and behold, I find that everyone is able to correctly identify the envelope with 11 paper clips. And I want to say, yes, people can identify the difference. What's the problem?
It was a sample size and not a population, so you can't
I can't take everyone in the world and have them do this, right? I've got to take a sample.
It's always on the same side.
It's always on the same side. What were you going to say, Dan?
I was going to say dominant hands. So if you're left-handed, it might not seem as heavy as the right one.
Right. So I'm asking people to tell me which thing is heavier. And there's this thing called hand dominance. And most right-handers use their right hands a whole lot more often than they do their left hands, which means what?
The lighter anyway.
Yeah, the one in the right is going to be stronger. So because there's a difference in strength between left and right, you would expect that the one on the left, even if I put the same number in, right? If I lied to people and asked them to tell me which one is heavier, I would guess that more people would indicate that the left one is heavier simply because of the difference in hand dominance. Does that make sense? That's a problem. It's a big problem. That means I can't be sure if people can really tell the difference in one paper clip, or their left hands are just weaker than their right hands. Those are 2 possible explanations for the same set of data. Does that make sense? Just like the whole I love you thing. Please buckle your seatbelt. I forget who said that. Yeah, okay, so Josie, buckle your seatbelt. Is that because the person loves you, or is it because they don't want to have to pay for your hospital bills, right? That's consistent with both of those interpretations, which means that we are confused or confounded. So, the variable types I want to talk about are independent, dependent, extraneous, and confounded. Or confounding. I'll use confounding. So, independent and dependent should be easy at this point. So what is an independent variable?
You can manipulate it.
It's a variable that you can manipulate it in some situations. In the situations in which you can't manipulate it, what would be an independent variable? Use my definition, not Dr. Cameron's. Pardon?
Something that can lead to another one?
Something that can lead to another one. So we'll use words instead of thing in one. So one variable that can lead to another variable. Close. But you need to add maybe a couple more words in there. It's not one variable leads to another variable.
A variable that can influence the outcome of another variable.
Beautiful, that's perfect. So one variable that can influence the outcome of another variable. Stated differently, it would be a variable that when changed will change the outcome of some other variable. So if we think about the ice cream and drowning thing, right? So these two things are related, they're correlated. But is it that changes in ice cream lead to changes in drowning? Probably not. It's possible, right? You may have heard like, oh, don't go swimming half an hour after you eat. So during the summer, you know, kids are eating more ice cream, and so then they're going to be getting in the pool, some of them, after they eat ice cream. So there might be a link between one and the other. But what's the more clear link? What's the bigger possibility?
Summertime.
Summertime or?
People swim when it's warm, so.
Yeah, temperature, right? The warmer it is, the more people are going to swim. The warmer it is, the more people are going to get ice cream. Or if you're in St. Louis, or I guess other places too, I wasn't such a big fan of the ice cream, but man, a good shaved ice, like Hawaiian shaved, not the big chunky stuff, but like cools your body temperature. It was wonderful. Anyway, so the hotter it is, the more shaved ices people are eating, the more ice cream that they're eating. You change the temperature, you change the amount of ice cream or swimming that people are doing. And we could actually manipulate this. How could we do this? How could you manipulate temperature? And look and see if people ate more ice cream or swam more often. Okay? How do you do it?
Turn up the heater.
Turn up the heater. Where are you doing this? In a lab. Okay, so you have a lab and you turn up the heater. All right, so it's getting hot in here.
Got a public pool or
Put on ice
something.
cream.
Put on ice cream. So there's a lab. Okay. Hey guys, here's a fridge. You know, sorry, we're a little behind right now. The experimenter will be with you shortly. You know, feel free to help yourself to a beverage or, you know, ice cream, whatever in the fridge. We'll be back later. And that's actually the experiment. So we've used a little bit of deception there, right? And we could see if people ate more ice cream when we cranked up the temperature in the lab to 85 compared to like 72, right? So we could manipulate that. I was thinking like get a hotel. That'd be really expensive. But get a hotel and offer free ice cream on Friday. And then have a couple different Fridays, one where you crank up the temperature, another one where you crank it down, and there's a pool in the hotel, and you can see both whether people swim more and they're eating more ice cream, right? So we could do that. And by manipulating things, we have a bit more confidence in our ability to draw out causal relationships. Why would we have a better ability to identify causal relationships when we're manipulating something?
Well, you can like see the source of the change. I mean, if something isn't going with what you think, like temperature, if you turn up the temperature, people are eating more ice cream, or maybe they aren't swimming quite as much, then it wouldn't go with your, you know.
Yeah, so you can make the change, and then you could observe whether or not the predicted change is going along with the changes you thought it would, right? Why is that better than just like observing what temperature it is today and asking people how much ice cream they asked or they ate or plan on eating today?
Because they're gonna lie. maybe not lie, but not gonna maybe tell the truth.
Not be able
That's
to
fine.
You might not be able to find the conditions within a reasonable amount of time to study it.
So I might have to wait for the because temperatures can often be fairly stable over a period of time, so we might have to wait a long time before it dips down enough to have an effect. Maybe. So in the reading, I'm creating this example. Do men score better on tests than women do? And it's kind of funny. So traditionally, like IQ scores and other things have suggested what about differences between men and women in academic performance? Which sex is stronger? Not stronger physically, but women. Traditionally? Yeah, men do better in math, right? Yeah, so traditionally there have been these findings that men do better in math. Wow, we're smarter, yahoo. And so people want to draw causal relationships between this, right? You're male, that will cause you to be good in math. You're female, that will cause you to be not so good in math. And of course there's variability, right? So I'm pretty good in math, and there could be one or two women who are better than, actually there are lots of women that are better than me. But on average, if that were true, you would expect men to score higher on average than women do, right? And what have the more recent data suggested? Women are doing better in math and most other subjects now. It's funny, when I was in Turkey, one of my students had posted on Facebook something about, you know, you women need to understand your place. You're outcompeting us men. And because of this, we're not going to be able to get the good jobs. We're not going to be able to get into good schools and programs and stuff like this. But we're the ones that are going to be making money and supporting you. Interesting. So, why would women have performed worse in the past on some of these measures, but be performing better now?
Women weren't allowed to have the right education or the same education as men were.
So it could be educational differences, right? So, sorry, you're a woman, stay home, learn how to knit and quilt and cook and good. You're a man, come to school. But that hasn't been the case for a long time, at least in America, right? Both sexes are expected to go to school. And if men or women don't go to school and they're under a certain age, the truant officers are supposed to be coming after them, right? So both of them should be coming to school, so why were women doing more poorly before?
Maybe you have to do something with having kids.
But this is, I mean, you're not having kids when you're in 4th grade, hopefully, right?
A more traditional view and mindset of the teachers.
Can you explain that further? So a more traditional view of the teachers.
Like, just going off my own experiences too, like growing up, the boys were always expected to do better, and when they didn't do better, then they got the extra help, and the girls didn't.
Huh, so maybe there's this expectation that men are better in math, which is somewhat justified by the evidence available at the time, right? I mean, this isn't coming out of nowhere. Most stereotypes don't. So there's a stereotype based on some evidence, and then people react due to this stereotype, whether they mean to or not. So, you fail. Of course, she's a woman. That's just your lot in life. Sorry. You failed. Man, is everything going all right? You don't need to cry. Why don't you come into my office? You know, I can help you. So perhaps I'm offering different opportunities to the males than I am to the females. However, knowing that teachers are overworked, that's probably not the case if they're going around and saying, okay, you're a woman, don't bother coming to my office. You're a man, please come. Right? But what are some other things that can occur in the classroom that you guys may know about? How do instructors teach or treat their male and female students differently when they ask or answer questions based on the stereotypes?
They try and simplify it more for the females and like make it like smaller, easy to manage pieces instead of going over like the big concepts concepts with the guys when they ask questions.
So if I'm trying to make it simpler to a female, I mean, shouldn't that help? Wouldn't that make it easier for the female to do well?
No, I mean like they do the baby version instead of like the real version.
But still, I mean, you start with baby steps. Go with it, go with it. Someone take that and run. I mean, it seems on its face like, oh yeah, she didn't get it, I'm going to give you the baby steps and walk you through it. Hopefully that will get her up to speed, right? Whereas it the guy, he doesn't get it, I'm not going baby steps, you can handle this, son. Ugh.
It makes him work harder to achieve on his own.
Oh, that's interesting. So maybe he's going to have to work harder because he doesn't have all the steps laid out for him. So that's one possibility. What's another possibility? I'm so glad you came up with that one because I wasn't thinking that.
Like after the initial study, they found that men were doing better, so then women got like supplemental help to bring them up, and then men did.
Right, but this baby's talk, I mean, or baby descriptions, this is a form of supplemental help, right?
Does it make it easier for women possibly? Like they just make the workload easier? I don't know if that's possible.
Yeah.
I don't know where you're going with this. I don't think anyone in the class does. Maybe
I don't know.
baby step it.
I mean, I suppose they could do that, but that'd be kind of hard and you could get in big trouble for doing that. Because it'd be pretty obvious, like, oh, okay, here's the math test, here you go, 2 plus 2, all right, what's the cube root of 49? Do that. Okay, Natasha, you had something?
No.
Okay.
Does it hurt their self-confidence a little bit then?
It certainly could.
Yeah. Because if you talk to them as if they're a child, like it's going to make them feel like they're not worthy of being treated like an adult.
Right?
Hurt their self-confidence, and then they're not going to perform as well because they think that they're bad. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Okay, so you said that there could be a role of a self-fulfilling prophecy in this. So I treat them as if they're not as intelligent. They might internalize this and then not apply themselves to the same extent. But I would argue that that can happen even before the teacher, although you're definitely right. But think about learning, operant conditioning. Who's had a course in learning? Anyone yet? Even the intro version of operant conditioning? What's going on in operant conditioning?
Just operant conditioning shaping. I'm looking at you again.
It's shaping is an application of operant conditioning.
It's like
Stimulus, so you're learning.
Not stimulus. That's classical.
Oh, my bad.
No problem. This is why you're in college.
Would it be like that they just always were expected to do worse, so then they just go with that? They just learned that they're gonna just not do as well. Like
That has, I think, still to do with the self-fulfilling prophecies and, you know, internalizing the
Is
stereotypes.
stimulus reward?
Yes.
Okay, so they're not getting rewarded for their hard work, or getting rewarded properly.
So they don't feel like they have to work as hard.
But I would say that, like, saying, I'm going to be really offensive now. Sorry, sugar. Let me explain this to you, okay? Guys, hold off for a minute.
I punch you so hard.
Now, it's not going to be that blatant, probably. I hope. Really? Oh,
Like,
I'm sorry.
y'all just need to calm down.
Inhibitory roots.
No, but so imagine, a male asks a question, and I'm like, oh, that's a good question. And, you know, let's take a look at that. You want an example? Here, I'll give you an example. 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, whatever. We do it, right? And then, oh, yeah, I'm sorry you don't get that. You know, why don't we take an example? Maybe can help you. How's that making someone feel? That's not a reward, that's punishment, right? So what's going to happen? So you are reinforcing the behaviors of the men. They're raising their hands, they're answering. When they get the answer wrong, the teachers are more likely to say things like, good try. And the females, when they get the answer wrong, the teachers are more likely to say, no.
Makes them stop trying. And
Makes them stop trying. And if they stop trying and stop asking, what's going to happen? They're not going to learn as much, right? And there are a whole bunch of other things too. But think about it. We've come up with several potential explanations for why women could have performed worse in the past, right? So it could be that they've internalized the stereotype. Another one could be that the way that men and women are being taught to, or I guess boys and girls are being taught to in the classroom, is differentially reinforcing the males to get them to contribute and talk more, right? So you've got two possible explanations, which means that we have a confounding. What's an extraneous variable? Let's say all you guys failed my last quiz. I'm going to ask you why you failed. Natasha, why did you fail? She didn't study. Good. Why did you fail, Derek?
I was sick with the flu and couldn't get to it in time.
Okay.
I didn't take the quiz.
Didn't take it.
You cover material that you can cover in class.
It's your fault.
It's my fault. Why?
If everyone failed the quiz, I mean, there's gotta be.
No, everyone who's not here, they did fine. My online students had no problems. Why'd you fail, Allison?
I was recovering from the picnic.
So there's this thing, it's called the learning performance distinction. And a teacher, in order to say whether or not we think that students have learned something, we have to look at their performance. So what do we look for their performance on? Tests, quizzes, exams, oral reports, whatever, right? There are lots of ways to measure performance. But the fact that you failed something or even succeeded at something doesn't necessarily mean that you learned the material. You got 100%. Why?
Lucky.
Just lucky. Unprobable, but possible. Why did you get 100?
It was study.
He studied. Darn right he did. Why'd you get 100?
Got lucky.
Why'd you get 100?
I paid attention in class once.
Once.
What was that?
The test wasn't very comprehensive. Why'd you get 100?
That's still the answer.
Good, right? So there are potentially lots of explanations for why someone did well and why someone did poorly. My dad just died. I couldn't focus. I have unbelievably bad test anxiety. I pulled an all-nighter and I fell asleep. I've actually shown up at the last minute to exams. That's not good. I did that in graduate school. Don't do that in graduate school. Anyway, the whole reason why I have the optional final that you can make up is because I did this in graduate school. And thank goodness my instructor had the same policy. I took it from her. Yes. That's my source, so I didn't plagiarize. Okay, so any of these other possibilities besides the thing that we think that could have affected the dependent variable are extraneous variables. So I'm interested in the relationship between studying and exam performance, right? And I want to find that the more that people study, the more that the better their scores are, right? That's the relationship I'm trying to demonstrate, or the explanation that I want to provide evidence for. But there are a whole bunch of other things that affect test scores, like how you're feeling that day, whether you paid attention in class, even if you didn't study, whether you read the book, whether you're a good test taker, amount of anxiety that you have, whether you ate breakfast, whether you have a broken hand. All of these things can influence your test performance, right? So all of these other things, besides the one thing that I think, or that I'm interested in exploring the relationship of, those are all extraneous variables. So in the example of women's math performance, and maybe I'm interested in saying something about just women. By mere virtue of being a woman, you're going to have poor math performance, right? There are all of these other things that come into play. There are some men who have been treated poorly in math classes. One of the things that I tell students when they tell me oh, I suck at statistics or I suck at science or whatever, I say, look, maybe you had some bad experiences. Don't write yourself off too soon, right? Because that's something else that could have influenced their past performance. So all these other things, besides the thing that I think is the independent variable, could potentially influence the outcome. Does that make sense? So let's take a look at this book, Applied Multiple Regression Correlation Analysis for the Behavioral Sciences. This book comes from the course in graduate school that I missed, the test tube. And so it asks, what is a cause? Conceptions of causality and definitions of cause and effect differed among proponents of causal analysis, some offering no explicit definitions at all. Causal analysis as a working method apparently requires no more elaborate a conception of causality than that of common usage. In our framework, to say that X is the cause of Y carries with it 4 requirements. So they say that there are 4 requirements, and I disagree with them. I think there are 3. I'll leave it up for you guys to decide. So, what do you think some of the requirements of demonstrating a causal relationship would be? There are 4, so let's see how many of you guys can get.
Repetition.
What do you mean, repetition?
Seeing the same results over a period of time.
Seeing the same results over a period of time. Can you sort of summarize that with the word that we've used recently? We're interested in variations. We're interested in variations of the independent variable going along with variations in the dependent variable, right? So, I mean, if you think about my initial test, I have one person come up and do it, but then I have a repetition. I have someone else come up and do it. And I have a third repetition. Someone else comes up and does it, right? So what am I looking for? That's probably a bad example, because I'm just looking and seeing if there's a difference as opposed to what's the cause of the difference. But I do have repetitions there. Replication is like a fancy way to think of repetition that involves completely replicating an entire experiment. But these 4 things are intimately related to validity, but correlation. That's it. We want to see if one thing correlates with something else. And if we do something a bunch of times, I mean, think about if we do something one time. So I want to see if height is correlated with weight. Maybe I shouldn't pick anyone. How tall are you? I am 6'3". How heavy are you? I am 167 pounds. What? You could have asked me like 4 years ago. I was at 285. Woo! Anyway, so we can plot this. Height, because I'm predicting that weight is dependent on height, not the other way around. Height, weight. I'm going to scale these things. I'm not going to put the labels on, but here I am up here. Height, I'm tall. My weight, yeah, reasonably weighty. Yes, but here we have one observation. We haven't done any repetitions, which means what? What will the variance be?
None.
In fact, the variance is undefined. N minus 1, you have 0 in the denominator. Infinity? It's a problem. So we have to have at least 2 points, right? So we've got to have some repetitions. So when we do a correlational study, we have a whole bunch of data points, right? We have variations in one thing and variations in another thing. We want to see if they go together more than we would expect just due to chance. That's exactly right. So the first thing is a correlation. The 2 things, in order for there to be a causal relationship, the 2 things must be correlated. Which means, what about correlation? It's necessary, sufficient, necessary, and sufficient. It's necessary. You have to have a correlation for 2 things to be causally linked. Just because you have a correlation is not sufficient to indicate that they are causally linked, right? The ice cream to deaths might not be causally linked. So there's a correlation there, but there are some other problems. So let's see, this was number 3 in theirs, so we got number 3 already. The order doesn't matter, I don't care about the order. What other things? So to establish causation, we need to have a correlation. Don't know.
I didn't have a question first, I don't know.
Think guns don't kill people? People do. If you're shot by a gun, and you die, like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Did you die and then you got shot?
Order of causation?
There's an order of causation. So if there's a causal relationship between two things, what does the order need to be? This was the number one. And I'm going to say temporal precedence. Temporal, it's fancier, sounds more sciencey. So what needs to precede what? I'm hoping this is just like so obvious and duh that no one wants to say it. I'm talking about causes and effects. What precedes what? The cause comes, or the proposed cause comes before the proposed effect. So we're talking about eating baked beans and gas, right? And one of the questions that I did to sort of further support my idea that the baked beans cause gas is to do what? I asked someone a question. What did I ask them? I asked them what they ate, but I asked them something else too. Because I found out that the 3 people that ate baked beans, they all had gas. But I said it's possible that all the gassy people, like, I don't know, there's something about giving off lots of gas that makes people really hungry for beans.
What did you have before?
Yeah, so I asked people, did you eat beans before or after you had the gas? Right? And it turned out what? They ate the beans before. So the thing that I identified as the potential cause, the baked beans, I established that they ate the baked beans before I observed any of the effects, right? The alcohol preceded his walk to the bathroom. The brownie preceded their giggles, right? So we have things must be correlated, there must be an order or temporal precedence. What else? 2 more that they say, and just 1 more that I say.
The strength?
No, because the strength is going to be indicated in the correlation. It has to do with these 2 things.
Oh, the situation?
What about the situation? Sorry, I can't hear you right now. Go ahead. We need to know all the variables. So what temperature is it right now? What's the barometric pressure? What's the solar flare activity like? What color shirt are you wearing? Is that a synthetic blend, wool, cotton, what? How much does your hair grow on your face per day? I mean, all the variables is too much.
It needs to remain consistent regardless of other variables.
So can you say what the it is that you mean?
The cause.
The cause?
And the effect.
And the effect, so the correlation?
Yes.
The correlation should remain consistent or roughly the same regardless of other variables. Is that what you're saying? So, here, I lost the page. I'm going to say ring ding ding. The effects of X and Y can be isolated from the effects of other potential variables on Y. And they say non-spurious or lack of confounders. Non-spurious, lack of confounders. Other explanations are ruled out. I'm going to say no confounding. If we observe the same correlation, regardless of how men and women have been treated in the room, regardless of the stereotypes that they may have been brought up and exposed to, regardless of which toys they were given as children, regardless of which toys they preferred to play with, regardless of the amount of estrogen levels coursing through their system, regardless of the colored clothes that they wore. If that correlation stays the same, or, I mean, it could increase or decrease a little bit, but if we saw that correlation despite any of those other differences, then we'd have a really strong idea that none of those other differences really matter, and that there really is some underlying difference in sex. Does that make sense? So, the fourth one, I'll give it to you. A change, some mechanism whereby this causal effect operates can be positive. I'm not going to make it. Causal mechanism, what does that mean, a causal mechanism?
What actually caused it?
Well, but wouldn't we say, aha, it was sex that caused it. It was baked beans that caused it. It was this bullet that caused it.
Maybe what led up to the cause?
It's not what led up to the cause, but it's how that cause could have had its effect. So I get shot with a gun, and I die. And we say that, the bullet killed me. How did that bullet kill me? Yeah, but another person pulling it is not the bullet killing me, right? So we're getting farther back in the causal sequence. How did the bullet end up killing you?
It goes through your skin, ruptures your blood vessel artery, you lose your blood, and your heart stops something, you lose the flow of your brain.
There you go. That's one potential causal mechanism, right? So the bullet enters my skin, it disrupts my circulation, I lose a bunch of blood, my heart stops beating, no oxygen's getting to my brain tissue is destroyed, I'm dead. Or it pierced my skin and it destroyed or disrupted enough connections in my brain to kill me instantly, right? So those are two mechanisms by which what is thought to be the cause could have affected the outcome. So I'm not like a biology guru or anything. So I don't know why baked beans cause gas, but how could they? Can anyone think of a causal mechanism?
Well, placebo effect?
Placebo effect, so this is the idea that baked beans really don't cause any gas. It's just I'm expecting to have gas, which could do a couple different things. Maybe it changes our body, so you could study psychoneuroimmunology and you'll find out that your expectations massively change what your body does. Although I'm not sure if it produces gas unless maybe you're increasing your anxiety. So I suppose if you're worried about having gas, then you start tubing a little bit more. Or it could just make you more aware of the times that you tube. Maybe you're tubing the same amount all the time, but you're like, oh, I just had beans, and you pay more attention to that, right? But if beans really did have an effect, and your claim is that they don't have an effect, it's your mind powers. So if beans really aren't having an effect, how are they doing it?
Chemical breakdown.
So there's some chemical process going in. Fermentation releases gas. Maybe it's fermentation coming out of your tush, right? So there's some chemical process. I don't know if it's fermentation or something else, but there we have it. So causal mechanism. So which of these things do you think I could cross out and be happy with? Or reasonably happy with? Okay, which is it? I thought I heard an answer. Number two, I could get rid of the temporal order, right? So it's possible that the effect could come before the cause. And I've actually done some research to see if this works. So we give someone a word, we show them a word briefly, And what we want to see is how quickly they can identify that word. Now, in the normal situation that this is done, people do what's called a priming experiment. So I might show you one word, and then I'll show you another word, and I'll ask you how quickly you can say that second word. And so if I show you nurse briefly, even if I show it to you in such a way that you're not consciously aware of what you've seen, so I present it really fast, and then I put up a jumble, so you're like, whoa, what was that? And then I show you the word doctor, or the word river. Which word do people do faster than? Doctor. So they see nurse, nurse comes before the doctor, and then they see doctor and they're faster at saying doctor. Now what happens if I say nurse, doctor, but what I really want is people to identify that first word. So I'm looking for the time that it takes them to identify that first word, but then I'm showing them doctor after I've shown them the first word. We wanted to see if something in the future could affect processing of something in the past. And it actually turned out that we didn't find an effect. Surprise. So should the cause precede the effect, or is that really sort of unnecessary? In general, the cause is thought to precede an effect, right? And this makes sense given the naturalistic direction that science has, right? A precedes B. There's a force. I push on this table, it pushes back on me. It doesn't push back on me until I start pushing on it, right? Okay, so I like to. Let's go. This doesn't have to be so slow. You can just shout out 1 or 3, 4, whatever. 4. Why 4?
Because it's already been proven with the correlation and
With
well,
what?
not evidence with the correlation, and then the order along with all the other extraneous variables have been ruled out.
So if we observe a correlation, and it seems that the one thing temporally preceded something else, and we've ruled out other explanations, even though we might not be able to explain why this is happening, it doesn't mean that it's not happening that way. So if you think about Darwin's theory of evolution, Darwin's theory of evolution predicts changes in generations. According to what? Environment. Environment is related. What else?
Natural selection.
Natural selection is part of environment. What else?
Genetics.
No. Sorry. Actually, yes, but no. So Darwin didn't know about genes then.
Heredity.
He talked about heredity, and he talked about heritable factors. There must be some type of heritable factor. We have no idea how or why this is going to work, necessarily, but there's got to be something there. And so much, much later on, people learned about genes. And they said, aha, here's the heritable factor that he was talking about, before he even knew what it was or how it could have an effect. They didn't know that the genes are, stripped apart and RNA is shuttled off to one place where protein, they didn't know any of that stuff. So at the time, there was no good causal mechanism description. It's magic. Some magical heritable factors. And later on, we figure out what that is, right? So out of these 4, yeah, it's this one that I don't think is as important. It is important. At some point, hopefully, we'll figure out what those things are. But just because you haven't figured that out yet, doesn't mean you can't establish causation with those others. See that?